and we're going to talk about this thing, the second ask. The second ask is complicated because it's like what's going on is that you were just talking to someone and they said no, right? They said no to your first ask, which is awkward because now there's this weird, what do you call it? There's like this power dynamic that starts to build when someone says no to you. And it's like there's this thing that kind of goes through your mind sometimes where it's like you just want them to say yes. You can get a little huckstery. There's a hustle going on with the second ask, and it can be confusing sometimes of like, when do you push back and when do you pivot? When do you do a second ask? Um, so, like, the basic summation of it is that a second ask is generally supposed to be easier and more accessible than the first ask. So, for like a phone banking ask, texting is easier than phone banking because it's a lot less work is involved. With phone banking 101, that's also an easier ask because it's like you don't have to do as much. There's a bit less of an expectation on you when you go to a training versus you go to a phone bank where there is going to be a training. The other thing is that, like, ideally your ask is a solution to the problem that's presented in the first one. So, like, if someone is nervous about phone banking, then that might be a time to do a phone banking 101 ask because what that is it's going to ease their nerves and it's a solution to their issue in ask number one. And then the other thing is the second ask is normal because second asks happen all the time. People say no to the things that we ask them to do more often than they say yes. You know, some people need some work. You got to do pushback. You got to, you know, figure it out. So that's like what second asks are. And I think the skill set thing to think about that, like, I've noticed before, I used to do this a lot as a canvasser, but I used to do this thing where someone would say no to whatever my first ask was. And then what I would start to do is I would go into this like hustle and I would start to like talk really quickly and think really quickly. And I would try to like reverse engineer this person's life where they'd be like, oh, I don't have time to volunteer because like I work like these weird hours on like Monday through Friday, and then Saturday I work from like 9 to 3 or whatever. And I would go into this thing where I'd be like, okay, well, maybe like on this specific time, on this specific day, like you could do that. And then if you do this other thing to remind yourself, and like I was just trying to like plan it out for them, and it was way overboard. And I was bringing in this really anxious energy that was, of course, making them say no because they're watching me freak out and they're like, whoa, 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 like, no, I'm not gonna say yes now. Like you're going too far. And I think the thing is like brevity's huge, but in that second ask especially, you wanna try to make it as simple as possible. So it's like you don't need to go into a whole thing like building it up. So it's like if someone is like, well, I'm a little nervous about phone banking, so I don't really want to. You don't need to like go into this piece where you're like, well, if you go to a phone banking training, like that's a lot more chill. It's going to be a lot easier. You know, I think that's going to work a lot better for you. You get on the phones, you do the training for a half hour. You know, how's that sound? Like we've all done asks that were like that before. And I think like a better way to generally handle something like that is if someone is like, no, I don't want a phone bank because I'm nervous, just be really simple and really intentional and just be try your best to just make it more like, okay, you could also just go to one of our phone bank trainings on Sunday. How does that sound? Something like that is a lot more appealing than like going into the hustle of it. If you start off simple like that, it becomes a lot easier to get someone to say yes, if not at your pitch later into the conversation. Um, and then going back to our friend Batman, who always has great advice. Uh, the context of this scene is that Batman is interrogating the Joker, and he asks Joker some questions, right? He asks the Joker, "Why do you want to kill me?" And the Joker doesn't really tell him. The Joker's being very coy in this famous scene in The Dark Knight, and it's unsatisfying. And Batman does not get what he wants. Now, if he wanted, he could keep asking the Joker, "Why do you want to kill me?" He decides not to. Batman does a pivot, and he does a second ask, and he goes, "Where are they?" And then this works. The Joker does tell Batman where his friends are. And what happened is that Batman essentially asked a question that was a lot easier to answer than the first, and that he read the room. He understood that if he kept asking, "Why do you want to kill me?" he wasn't going to get what he wants. So instead, he had another question that he had waiting up his sleeve, and he asked that instead. And he got what he wanted. He found out where his friends were. He went to go save them. Um, Unfortunately, the Joker lied and he gave Batman the wrong addresses and he went to the wrong place. So it was a big bummer and it didn't actually work out. But, Batman tried. He did your classic phone banking second ask structure.